dance artist now kind of sums it all up. So, I got lots and lots of information over many years about how or why or from what starting point one could be making material. And then I went to graduate school at Sarah Lawrence College and got my MFA, at which point I was 50-something years old and discovering that maybe I wanted to pursue my dance-making voice. Like, it wasn't like I didn't know everything and then I went to graduate school and it was like, oh my God. But honestly, to become a student again full-time, really was like the next turning point. You asked me what was there one little turning point? Like I think it was a whole bunch of points. And then I started in 2014 something called Megan Williams Dance Projects. So far I haven't really, this bigger piece that I just made was the biggest, longest thing I've ever made that's been out in the world. And the fact that it had dark subtext to it that some people didn't even catch.
Oh, wow, okay.
And other people caught and were triggered and really sensitive to. So that was sort of interesting. Why? Because I wasn't punching people in the gut or throwing it in their face. Like, this is what this moment is about. I got such a wide array of responses to it. I found that kind of interesting. But I also know that that's about, at least at this juncture, about how dark I'm going. The whole, grab them by the pussy and all the rhetoric that was happening during the election time, and my awareness of how women choreographers in particular were responding to that or not responding to it. I was already in the process of making this thing, so again, I was sort of wanting to push it as far away from me as possible, which I think is maybe a normal response, as opposed to diving right in and saying, this is my time to make this. In some ways, I don't mind making work that's antidote to what's going on in the bigger scheme of things. And there's pushback from that. Why is that? Is it relevant, your work? Yes, because you're making it. It is. It's relevant to me. So, and I think most, at least generationally, I feel like most people my age who are making work, it's not that they're saying, fuck it, I don't want to make work that's politically potent, but at the same time, most people I know feel like if you tell me how and what I have to make work about, then I'm not going to make the work. It's just going to completely squash my ability. And then all the women marched post-election. In a way that was really great and also frustrating for me. I remember being on the commuter rail because I'm going to Westchester, going in by myself to meet some friends, and some friend of mine had made a pussy hat for me. We were all wearing these fucking cats, and it was, I had a poster and all this, and there was a bunch of younger women sitting all excited, and I just thought, well, this is the day to talk to people I don't know. And I went up and I said, it's great that you're marching today. And they're like, yes, we're so excited to be marching. And I said, so what are you going to do tomorrow? And they looked at me like I was just the crazy old lady. I said, no, I'm just asking you that because I'm trying to consider, I feel excited to march today, but I know I'm going to get inspired to, do something active tomorrow. And they were like, this. And I asked people on the way home too, even more sincerely, as people were just getting rid of their signs and going, yay, let's go out and drink, and we marched all day. And I got really frustrated, and I went into my local politics. So I'm a district leader in my village. So that was what I decided to do. And I can't force people to do anything. So I think about my political self and then my art self and wonder why or how they don't dovetail more. And the thing I've come up with is the fact that I need to, it almost feels like balance. If my whole life life was politically sparked,
Right.
I think I would not be able to feel as healthy as I do.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of an answer. It's not a cop out because I just don't think because I think that art as a political act, I feel like I'm doing that just by making it.
Absolutely. I definitely
And some
agree
people
with
will, and some people will push back on that. As a middle-aged, white, straight, cis woman, is that my demographic, like I'm aware of all those nomenclatures now
Yeah.
in a way that I wasn't when 5 years ago,
Right.
and even more so 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, I'm not a disenfranchised group right now.
Right.
I'm a woman. I identify as a woman, but I work with people who are part of the queer community, part of people of color, and my awareness of what I can ask for as an artist. This is really hard to say out loud. It's sort of not my time to tell a story because I don't know if my story needs as much a voice as some other people's stories right now. So it puts me, again, I go back to saying, but I'm still going to make the work. I'm still going to make what I want to make. I'm not going to feel like I have to make something more political to have it to be like out in the world. But I look around me and I see that I see people whose work needs support.
Yeah.
And I also know that I can't tell other people's stories.
Yeah.
That I'm super, super sensitive in this climate to knowing where and how my voice fits into the bigger picture.
Right. Yeah.
So I would say I'm making dances about gender and about feminine identity. And those are two very politically charged things that don't necessarily have to do with racism or give me the ism list that Trump has induced, right? And it remains to be seen whether, I'm going to start making stuff that's more politically charged.
Right.
But it's as political as I am. I think my goal in the next couple of years, let's just say, I can't go down any further than that, is to be braver about statements I want to make. Not feel like I have to be polite about things, So this new piece I'm working on, I think I will feel a little braver.
My name is Winston Dynamite Brown, and I am a native of Kansas City, Missouri, and I'm a professional dancer, choreographer, and teacher. During the 90s, the Crips and Bloods was very prevalent in my city, and so my neighborhood was in blue, so I didn't really wear red until I was deep into my 20s, and so it taught me how to be aware of my surroundings in a way, and I really started to really watch people and kind of assess my environment and get to know how people are going to respond to me, because I would be in my neighborhood and be one way, and I had to literally learn how to kind of code switch. My mother made it paramount that she send us outside of our district to go to school, and so just because she knew that exposure was everything. So that's another thing I believe, that exposure makes a huge difference. You can only strive to be better if you have a physical example in front of you. TV is great, but if you don't have someone within your neighborhood that's tangible near you, that you can say, like, I know this person, this exists, I could potentially do that, then it's very hard to have any kind of real aspirations, what I mean? So I was very fortunate in that way. I told people I got jobs out of high school to dance, but I knew that I needed more time. I didn't want to pigeonhole myself into one kind of, and I really wanted to give myself time to learn who I was. And so that I can know how I wanted to share dance and not just simply be a tool, but be somewhere, but be a vessel that's willing and capable of contributing because of information I acquired. So I had to be a dancer or a creative of any kind. It's very challenging because honestly, it's not something that's nearly respected or revered or even honored in this country in the way that it is in other countries, and not to mention, the disparity between men and women, the disparity between white and black, and how people respond to your work. The company started because we needed, a good friend of mine, Remy Harris, curated a showing, Food for Thought, and I didn't want the company to be like the Winston Dynamite Brown company. I'm trying to, it's going to become synonymous, but I don't want it or need it to be connected to me in that way, nor do I need it to be synonymous with my physical participation. I really am interested in my choreographing voice being separate from my physical sharing. Knowing that that's hard, but I'm really doing my best to make those separations. And so having a name like Dynamite, which is my legal birth name, is something that I can't ignore. And I like the balance of a very structured, regal name like Winston and Dynamite, those two completely different things. And going back to my main objective in creating is for the audience to have a visceral response, and that's literally to have an experience. And so the Dynamite experience just kind of marries the kind of audaciousness of my parents of naming me that and the experience that I want to kind of create. And it's something audacious about saying, like, I have something to say that I think you might like. Right. And I'll look at it. And so it's this back and forth between me and the audience. And being like, my company, I want to reflect society, but they won't always be political, be driven. You know what I mean? They might rub you wrong or expose you to a truth you weren't yet aware of, but it is always meant to reflect. And if it hits you in a political way or if it reminds you of that, then absolutely that's great. But I try to reflect more than anything, and that's definitely in response to what I've witnessed Tyrone do for so many years. A few of my friends was having a conversation. How do we feel about aggressive racists versus passive racists? And I'd rather know how you feel up front, because then I can know what side of the street to be on. Right. I do not want to walk side by side with you if you have this unwarranted, unsolicited vitriol toward something I literally can't control. Right. Because bleaching my skin is not an option, because I'm going to still be black. You know what I mean? And so when I create work, it reminds me of something that Bill T said. He said, I am a black choreographer for the simple fact that I am black. You know what I mean? I don't need to speak on the Negro tropes that you accept to be my story. We all go to church, but I don't have to tell a church story. Right. You know what I mean? We all eat and organize outside, but I don't have to tell that story that's been told. I don't have to necessarily tell a story about growing up on the floor because there's bullets flying by or helicopters. Now, these things happened in my life, but these stories have been told. Right. You know what I mean? I'm interested in shining a light on other aspects and other ways that we live. You know what I mean? And that in itself is political. I mean, I speak in definitives, but when I'm sharing, I try to leave it open to other people to interpret. It is art after a while,
Exactly. And everyone's going to take something different.
They're going to take it different, and I want to leave breath in order for people to do that. I want it to be clear without, bludgeoning you against the head with it.
Right.
Because who needs that? But I try to be as honest and clear as possible, but without alienating people as much as I can. Because we want people to come.
Exactly.
We want people to sit in the seats.
Absolutely.
Okay, my name is Danielle Russo. My senior year of college, I started showing work out of school and trying to dip my toe into the professional community, and I kind of just have continued since, and then went to the Holland's ADF program where I met Daria Santana, and it was really during that moment that I got very interested in dance off the stage. Okay. And it was through that program that I started to become exposed to and had opportunities to create work that would occupy predominantly public spaces or interested in architectural spaces, forgotten spaces, trying to kind of bring life or some sort of reverence to a history, a previous life, kind of trying to, build a community or social awareness around architectures and buildings predominantly at first, and then given the past couple of years, I've become very much invested in, and also through the earlier projects, how the public was responding to the work, and wanting to engage the public more, and then shift from architecture more into this idea of more looking at location in terms of place and the history of these different places throughout the city. I came out of a very different historical approach to moving and training when I was younger, and it was much more about the moving body in terms of a figure or a means, a tool within a larger scope of artistic work. And I feel like as I have gotten older, and then B, also through the conversations that were facilitated and encouraged, and really in many ways just kind of like dramatically shifted my perspective. I mean, it was really important, and I'm very grateful for the of having to look at the work from a more scholarly perspective, and to be a little bit more critically minded about what was being made, like what I was watching, what I was doing, and then really, I think it sounds so simple, but at the time, just taking a moment to think about its place in like the larger world, and if that role that I either created or was a part of was what I actually wanted to be doing with my work. Like, what is my work doing? How is it either a reflection of the larger world? In my own life experience of those that I'm creating work with, and how is it not? And then from there navigating, because you can create in various ways, but then having to really think a little bit more critically. So there was a lot of theory and a big emphasis on the history and the psychology of making in graduate school. Okay, so Sentinel had 5 solos, 5 solos about 30 minutes each, for the purpose of being on site at these specific politically or socially charged landmarks throughout New York City. All of these dancers brought their own personal stories to the making of the work, to the performance of the work, and they were akin to the story at these particular locations. So, Sentinel came about in the late spring, summer of 2017. It was in conversation for a couple months prior to. So what happened was I was in the studio working with these 2 dancers, creating a completely different work over the course of the 2016 election. And following the election, then also following the inauguration, a lot had happened, of course, as we know, nationwide, but a lot happened here in New York that I feel like has been, and probably will continue to be overlooked quite a bit. There was a tremendous amount of hostility and violence that took place between a number of individuals, both those who were locally based, as well as a number of people who had come in for a number of rally events and marches, but also during the actual election night, because Hillary's campaign was based here, she was going to announce here, Trump is from here. There was a lot happening in here. There's a tremendous amount of tension. And I myself firsthand witnessed a number of incidents or close calls between individuals that was very depressing and saddening, and probably not too surprising, but I was surprised by the individuals who were being targeted, because there's a lot of people, and there were instances where I saw children being harassed by grown adults, and a number of grown adults attacking each other, or a lot of near assaults, but just really ugly language. And then as this is happening, we're coming in for rehearsal, we're warming up. The dancers are also bringing in their own stories. They're talking about things that they've seen or witnessed or experienced, or close friends of ours. It was every time we came to the rehearsal space, we spent a tremendous amount of time talking about what was happening. And then it never subdued, it just got worse. In our own specific lived experiences, we all had some really dark encounters or close calls or actual acts of violence that had taken place. And so the work that we were creating didn't seem relevant anymore. So we were like, we need to shift gears. So we decided that we wanted to create, as a collective, a work that was going to be a response, an and also a way of us trying to kind of work our way through what was happening into process, and then trying to also engage the community, create a conversation, create a space, not to narrate nor to sensationalize these events because they're quite serious, but to bring an awareness.
Right.
We saw it as a call to action, to listen. The space was for listening, and then from there trying to have conversation and just to kind of reinforce a bridge of empathy, no matter where you're coming from. To everything has become so desensitized, so dehumanized, so fragile. So we started to create, and given the nature of the work, we thought it would be appropriate to do this at public sites.
Yes.
To bring the work specifically to the locations, to the stories of which we were, going to be addressing. The first one that we had produced was in Port Richmond, Staten Island, which that particular neighborhood was one of the predominant communities that were targeted with the first executive order that Trump passed with regards to sending out ICE raids for targeting illegal immigrants, and specifically though going after Latino immigrants, going after Mexican immigrants. So he sent out ICE raids on this one particular night, mostly into Port Richmond, Staten Island, a couple also out in Bushwick, and we have no recollection. There's no record as to what has happened to these people, right? So I had been working with this dancer, Cesar Broderman, who is an immigrant from Mexico. He is a Mexican citizen. During this whole moment, well, before we even got into the process of making this dance, talking about his fears and anxieties about where he stands in this country. Can he go back home? If he goes back home, can he come back in? A lot of public harassment that he had been receiving since the election. He's also openly homosexual, so you layer that on top, and just being a target. And not sure where he fits, and trying to grapple with that. And so we wanted to create a solo together, based on a lot of gestural work, pulling from a lot of iconography from his own past, speaking to, doing our own social research, drawing from some stories and information that we had gathered, and then put together a solo that could be then returned to this area by this open park space that kind of is also nestled in this sort of residential intersection in Port Richmond. And we were there for a couple hours one afternoon, and we just performed it, and people from the public came out and watched. People from the church were there to witness it as well. We had also some interactions that just reinforced our need to create the work. Some people came and harassed him, called him some derogatory slurs, both to his sexual orientation as well as to the fact that he was Latino. And yeah, we documented it and created this film out of it. And we did that with all of the work. We decided that pink, it exists in nature, but in a way that if we were to use pink in like an urban setting, it was going to pop. And it would have the same kind of quality and effect as that, like of a target, like a red target. And speaking about these targeted stories, and speaking to the risk and vulnerability, and the way in which people are sort of projecting and profiling, because we're also, Sentinel really specifically looks at issues of surveillance and issues of domestic profiling, and issues of also alienation of these bodies, alienation of bodies that are many ways like native bodies, and individuals who are active, contributing members of our communities and societies, and our neighbors and our friends and our families, and the way in which people are just, there's always been so many margins, but the margins are getting wider and more strict and pushing further back, and the danger behind that and our concern with that. So we decided to use pink. So we started with Cesar from Port Richmond, Staten Island, and then we followed with Kayla Farish, who she and I, we spent a lot of time deliberating as to where we wanted to perform this work. So Kayla is a Black woman, and as you can imagine, there is a very extensive history of discrimination and racism in New York City across many different locations, and also happening at a very heightened rate right now as well. And so there were a number of different places where we could go. We decided to, one story really stuck out to both of us because it's quite close to where we both live, and we had no idea about it. So in Brooklyn on Eastern Parkway was designed by the same architect who did like Park Avenue and Central Park, and he created Prospect Park and Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn. And so it's this beautiful promenade with trees. Everything's lined with trees, and it's right next to like a number of residential homes and also sort of like these public landmarks and facilities. And a couple of days before the West Indian Day Parade, which is a moment where a lot of Caribbean culture is celebrated and embraced by the Brooklyn community, there were a series of nooses that were hung on trees along the area of Eastern Parkway and some of like the public library systems in those particular neighborhoods and surrounding the Parkway in that area of Brooklyn. And the first noose was hung on Eastern Parkway along one of its pathways, and nobody did anything about it. It didn't really get any coverage. Somebody spoke up when the second one was found at the public library space. They took it down. They cut off the bottom of it, somebody at Eastern Parkway, but nobody took it down. Nobody got a ladder out and removed this horrific statement and threat, and nobody did anything about it. And so we were both really kind of shook by that, and the fact that nobody really seemed to care, and the fact that and we're talking about, this is a pathway that is traveled, there's a tremendous amount of foot traffic on a daily basis. People see it and nobody's like responding to it. Like the level of insensitivity and disconcern was very troubling to both of us, and so we decided, and when we went back to the site and we did our scouting, we noticed that the rope is still there.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding.
A number of months later, So she was like, I'm gonna do it here, we did it. So we did it there, and we did it on a Sunday afternoon. We ended up doing her performance there, and we looped it a couple of times, and we've created videos out of these performances, also putting them on social media with an intention and a hope that it would create visibility around the story. And hopefully, and we did, and we included some text in the videos to kind of call out the local borough, government officials and local community boards to be like, this happened in your neighborhood, in your community, and we want somebody to take some responsibility for this. We want there to be some accountability. Like we want this to be resolved and addressed. There should be voice given to this. Like the whole hope of the work was that it was going to be a call to action to draw an awareness of these local incidents, to also in doing so hopefully instigate some sort of personal reflection upon its audience members, and to ask about, am I an active bystander? Am I silent? Is my silence complicit? What can I do? How can I create some action that could actually have some real change? Or how can I start a conversation? Or how can I prevent this from happening further within my own power? So there was, again, an underpinnings of social action.